Hello, and welcome to another episode of the High Council podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Worldwide, apparently. And today, I've got with me two people, in difference to, yesterday's episode. Today we've got, my co-host, Call Me Crazy.
What's up? I'm back and crazy once again.
Always crazy, my dude. And then we've got our our conspiracy theorist extraordinaire, Jacob, making his return.
I now have a quarter of my brain. The rest is in now two buckets on either side.
Right.
There's a plugged now.
Oh my god.
After research for stuff last night, and today, my brain has totally collapsed into just around gibbering madness. Only just enough in the tank for this podcast before I go back to, I don't know, like smearing my piss up the wall or something.
Just not functioning at all.
No.
Alright. So, conspiracy theories part 3. Now, today is a bit special. The reason why we're doing a part 3 and we're doing it right after part 2 is because Jacob has a conspiracy theory that I kind of agreed. Well, for what it deserves a full episode on it, but also it's such a fucking big conspiracy theory that just explaining what the conspiracy theory is probably gonna take a full podcast anyways. So this one podcast is dedicated to this one huge conspiracy theory, and I think that without really much further ado, Jacob, I think that you might as well just fucking roll with it and tell us what this conspiracy theory is and give us some of the juice, you know?
Okay, so how do I even begin to describe this theory? Because it is so nebulous, and every single thing that I read about it always has something different. Some people have access to more like declassified documents. Some people just use eyewitness testimonies, but it's a bit different for each person that I've listened to. But here we go. The crux of it, use a bit of a salacious opening line. The Third Reich never ended. It was stripped from parts and reconstituted into the world that we live in now. There's a kind of the official narrative of all of this is after World War II, when the Soviets and Allies won the war. The Nazis just disappeared. They just vanished into thin air. There was a few people that were tried at Nuremberg, and that's kind of it. It was just there, and we occasionally see flare-ups of fascism all across like different parts of the world. But history's not like that. I want to give you a bit of like an analogy here that a lot of people seem to treat history like it's a sack of potatoes. When you put a bunch of potatoes into a bag together, they kind of bruise and bash up against each other, but they mostly remain separate. But history's more like a bucket of water. When you add 2 buckets of water together, you don't get 2 water. History should be treated in a way of a weird kind of flowing of it, where things always brighten. To not sound like a complete nut, that everything in some way is connected to each other, and that sounds just totally nuts and insane. But so we can start with when the war ended. Berlin was taken, Hitler shot himself in the bunker, and this was the beginning of... Sorry?
Or did he?
Oh, did oh no, that's a whole other episode, mate. Stop. Welcome to part 72. Does this picture of this man with a suspicious mustache in a Kazakhstani McDonald's, is that Hitler?
We just dragged this on for way too long.
He may be 123, but I don't know. The man looks quite youthful for his age.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Well, some of the theories that we can discuss that are concrete, they've been admitted, they've been proven to be correct, is we can first off look at something called Operation Paperclip. I don't know how aware of this you guys are.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I'm a bit versed in it.
What about you, Ray?
I'm still brain. Like, wow, what?
Okay, so Operation Paperclip was a US operation to collect many Nazi scientists and engineers as possible uh, from from Germany. They gave them all pardons if they had had any kind of interactions with some of the more darker sides of the Third Reich, and took them back to the USA. And essentially, that was how kind of NASA began, because the V2 rocket was the first use of like rocket propelled technology in terms of weaponry uh, in World War well, ever. Essentially, the V2 rocket was a state of the art weapon, and that was what was used to create the kind of the national space, the National Aeronautical and Space Agency. So we've got, like, I think the US recruited about just over 1,000 scientists from Nazi Germany for that.
It was a lot,
And yeah, there was a lot, but that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Even like that they received pardons and their crimes were forgiven, but then we kind of we'll go a layer deeper. We'll just go under the water a little bit.
yeah.
The next part of this is what's known as the rat lines.
Mm-hmm.
The rat lines?
Lines, yes. So when the war ended, there was obviously going to be a lot of Nazis that would either stand trial. Only think about 10 were tried in Nuremberg.
Yeah.
But what was going to happen essentially was if the Allies got their hands on them, most likely they would have been tried. If they had got in the hands of the Russians, they probably would have been killed or gone to like the gulags. And so the rat lines were essentially a secret network of like travel lines, essentially, where the Nazis escaped from Germany to many different countries. One of the more friendly ones was Franco's Spain.
So kind of like back in the U.S. how we had the Underground Railroad, pretty much, basically.
Yeah, but the Underground Railroad. Oh god, my brain is broken. Help!
Try again.
Okay,
Reset.
try again. The Underground Railroad. That was about like slaves and that, wasn't it?
Yeah, they're trying to escape north from slavery.
Right. Okay. So similar, but for
Different
fascists.
reasons.
Yeah. So Franco had said to a lot of the Nazis, like, you can consider Spain your second homeland. So if they could get to there, they did. It wasn't just like Germans. It was the Vichy French. It was the Italian fascists. They all, a lot of them ended up in Spain. However, a lot of them ended up in South America.
Yes.
Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, Peru.
Yeah.
Were places where these Nazis ended up. But if we're to rewind a little bit, there is a bit of a precedent for them going to South America.
Mm-hmm.
So for a bit of context, once a lot of these countries in South America gained independence from the Spanish and the Portuguese, they weren't in the most economically stable kind of territory that they are, or a lot of them are in now. They had vast swathes of arable land, workable land, a lot of natural resources that needed manpower to make use of it. And so they had very open immigration policies there. And during this kind of time, between the 1800s, before World War One, and even after, a lot of Europeans, we're talking mostly Italians and Germans, Polish too, moved down to Latin America, and a lot of them settled in Chile. And this is where we start to kind of put this together a little bit, because one of the men that went down there was a man known as Paul Schaefer. You might hear different stories about Paul Schaefer, that he was a courageous soldier within the German government, within the Nazi government, but he was a medic. And from what I've read, the was to try and use the any kind of nicer words or swearing. He was really stupid,
Yeah.
incredibly dumb. So much so that he had an accident with a fork when he was little by trying to untie his shoelaces and somehow managed to poke out one of his eyes.
Yeah.
With a fork, untying his shoelaces. And Paul Schaefer was an evangelical Christian, and when he went down there after several different expeditions, tried to get through the jungles to a certain place in Chile that they could settle, and it failed. 6 expeditions went, and all of them immediately died of something called lockjaw, which I think has got a more modern name, but I don't quite. It's like similar to like sailors getting scurvy. It was just one of those things that was kind of about, but
Yeah.
anyway, they end up setting up a small colony in South Chile called Colonia Dignidad.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've heard of it.
Yeah. If there's one thing that I kind of want to point out, if you don't mention it about a certain person, that I kind of want to mention in this.
No, go on.
Joseph Mengele.
Yes.
'Cause-
Yeah, but he was going to get mentioned.
Yeah.
He was going to get mentioned because he was one of the guys that escaped
Yeah.
to South America.
Yeah.
He did?
Which is
What?
why there's a certain place
Mhm.
in South America, the name of it, but there is a town where the percentage of the population that is twins is
Yeah.
roughly 10%.
Yeah. Because
And
yeah,
go on.
because for those people who don't know, what Joseph Mengele was basically dubbed the Angel of Death, right, during this, because of what he experimented on for Hitler was, the Hitler Youth, the blonde hair, the blue eyes.
Yeah.
He experimented on if he could like with twins DNA, trying to like basically just make the Hitler Youth basically. Like he put ink in their eyes and stuff like that. Like he killed so many children experimenting on this shit. And people theorize then that because they went over in South America, now has such a high, I think it is the highest birth rate of twins in the entire world. So people are like, did he actually figure that shit out?
yeah,
Yeah.
That's just like another rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's another rabbit hole to go down.
Someday, but I just need to try and stuff the brain back into my ears.
Yeah.
To try and do that. But anyway, he set up a colony called Colonia Dignidad. Now, we moved back to Germany for a little bit. We'll leave for on like there for a little bit. We move back to Germany, where we meet another character known as Otto Skorzeny.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Otto Skorzeny, he was Austrian-born, and he was I believe he was the leader or one of the top ranks within the SS.
Yeah, something like that.
A lieutenant colonel within the SS, and so he was very, very close to Hitler. But he saw the writing on the walls as the war was ending, and he wanted to get out of Germany. He took refuge in Franco's Spain. That was where he stayed. But what he allegedly set up was a network used to try and either get prominent Nazis out of Europe or get them to Franco's Spain. And he called it Der Spinner, the spider, which is why this theory is sometimes referred to as the spider network.
Okay.
So he allegedly managed to smuggle out of Europe over 600 prominent Nazis. Allegedly, Joseph Mengele was one of them.
Yeah.
And Otto Skorzeny is a bit of a weird one because this is where we start to talk about how the Third Reich was reconstituted into the kind of world that we live in now. He managed to receive a pardon from. I think he received a pardon, or he just escaped. I'm not sure. My mom's absolutely just diabolical on this stuff. But he, mostly was in Francoist Spain, but he worked for many different people, including the training of militias within Europe. Because at this point, once the war had ended, the US had had shifted its focus from, they'd supposedly defeated fascism. It was the victory for, Western liberal democracy. However, the next big battle for them was heating up, and that was against communism. The level of gratitude they had for the Soviet Union, the amount of sacrifice they made, was greatly appreciated throughout the entirety of Europe. And you can see it with the political parties in Europe that communists were polling in countries such as France and Italy, two biggest places, and places even like what was it was Yugoslavia as well, where communists have basically made up the backbone of a lot of the resistance against the Nazis.
Yeah.
Now, we then look to America and the CIA, which, how we kind of talk about the Spider Network is there's a lot of different organizations that kind of came out of governments, created their own little agencies, and then detached themselves and become this kind of shadow governments, shadow organizations that have a lot of influence over certain activities that happened in Europe.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that the CIA needed to do was to essentially, if communists were to do an armed revolution and take over, they needed some way, although they had the US Army there, it would be popular for them to be there for like another war.
Yeah.
So this is where an operation which you can read about, it is all declassified, it is all there. It's called Operation Gladio.
Yeah.
And Operation Gladio was essentially the training of dissidents who were, anti-communist. But a lot of them were staunchly Nazis. A lot of them, you said they were disavowed it, but they found many prominent ones after their deaths that they were still absolutely idolizing Hitler until their dying breaths.
Yeah.
And the two biggest ones are in France and Italy. Now, the first one we can find here is they set up an organization. The CIA set up an organization in France. There's the SDECE, and they put the roster up full of a lot of people who were staunchly anti-communist. There were people who were members of big business. I think Peugeot was a big funder of the group in France. But one of the top-ranking people in this organization in France was Francois Grossouver.
Say that 5 times fast.
I don't even pronounce that right the first time. He eventually in 1981 became the advisor of the then socialist president Francois Mitterrand for secret operations. However, during his time in the war, once the Germans had taken over France, instead of joining up with the resistance, he decided to enroll in the basically the Vichy-backed fascist militia that was in France, and he claimed to have infiltrated the resistance on the behalf of the Vichy government.
Right.
So he obviously had a lot of involvements back in World War II with supporting the puppet regime in France, and now as the war ended, an ardent fascist was now trying to stop a popularly elected communist government from taking power in France. But it wasn't just that. It was also de Gaulle didn't like communists. He didn't really give them many seats in ministerial positions, and so there's this general air of anti-communism that starts to spread over Europe. But we move over to Italy, where Otto Scorzani had essentially helped do an operation with what was the very first form of the Navy SEALs, the Frogmen in Italy. And they'd helped basically Mussolini escape his prison before he was then eventually recaptured and executed. These these gentlemen and Otto Szény started to help train groups in Italy, fascist militias, to stop the communists from winning there. It was, again, it wasn't like in Russia where it was a violent revolution. They were all trying to get power through elections, try doing it the fair way. And what this led to in Italy was the so-called years of lead. We're talking thousands of people dying in explosions of train stations, of infrastructure, nations left, right, and centre. All of it by places like the Vatican and the Mafia and the US and the USA through the CIA. And it was all at the time black leftists, but declassified documents are now shown that the CIA knew that these attacks were happening, but they were encouraging it to be blamed on left wingers in order to snuff them out, to stop a communist takeover, because the Soviets really wanted Italy to join, as part of the USSR, as a client state. So we can see that in Europe, after the wars ended, that they immediately switch over to fighting communism, and with Europe decimated and the US not having much in terms of a stranglehold within Europe, the best way they could oppose it was through the funding of fascists.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys keeping up? Because I feel my brain's already melting.
No, I'm keeping up.
I'm keeping up.
All right. So now, let's take a turn and go back to Colonia Dignidad. Colonia Dignidad is such a strange and weird intersection in all of this, because it was out in the middle of nowhere. It was kind of built into this enclave, I believe it's called, of the mountains sides by mountains.
Yeah.
And it was essentially meant to be a recreation of Bavaria, where Paul Schaefer was from. But it wasn't just any old kind of recreation of Bavaria. It was in the kind of ideals of what's called the Volkisch movement.
Okay.
This kind of mystical look back at society within the pre-Weimar Germany, pre-industrial Germany, of these people that were strong, powerful, and capable, but slowly over time it was wrecked and destroyed, and you can fill in the gaps of who they blame on that. But it's also influenced a lot by occult stuff. There's a theory called Ariosophy, which is I don't even know fully what it is, but it's essentially the kind of mystical, this kind of mystical view of what the Aryan race was and what thought it used to be before it was spoiled in some sense.
Yeah.
So immediately we're getting into cult territory, which it was a cult down in Colonia Dignidad.
Yeah.
But it begins to get worse.
Yeah.
Down in Colonia Dignidad, Paul Schaefer was a prolific paedophile.
Yeah.
We look at Jeffrey Epstein and think Jeffrey Epstein is bad, but Jeffrey Epstein had jets, he had planes. Paul Schaefer was shipping people halfway across the world.
Yeah.
It's just insane, and you can see some of the pictures of him when he was even younger, when he was older, and it's just you just look at the guy and you get bad vibes. It's just bad juju.
Yeah, it's just bad juju
from him.
Yeah.
However, there was around a couple of thousand, I think it was about a couple of thousand people that live in Colonia Dignidad. But it was very strange what Colonia Dignidad had. It had some of the best plastic surgery in all of the Americas, North and South. And you can start to think that these rat lines that go out to South America and a tiny little place that had its own airport too, that plastic surgery begins to make a bit more sense.
Yeah.
That these people were probably going there to get plastic surgery to then go, obviously, to then live freely in other parts of Latin America without getting caught by, say, Mossad or a contingents of MI6 that were trying to find find Nazis, because there was like a very strong and large effort to hunt down Nazis.
Yeah, I realized like the hunt for Nazis kept on going a while after the war ended.
But even then, Otto Skorzeny was tracked down by, and the story goes that he was propositioned by this couple in a bar in and they wanted to have a threesome with him.
Right.
So they managed to they thought they convinced him. They got him in the hotel room, and thought they were about to obviously turn around and arrest him. And all of a sudden, behind them, they heard a click of a gun, and Scorsese going, "All right, so how did you find out about me?"
Yeah.
And that's when allegedly we see that Otto Scorsese started working for Mossad, as well as the CIA, and Franco-West Spain. This guy was Mr. Worldwide, international.
Yeah.
And he also worked as a sales representative for an arms company. I think it was Aram Co Steel.
Yeah.
In the US, he was also an arms dealer for the US as well.
What the hell?
Yeah, so you start to see that this opposition from the war to fascism really does begin to wear thin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now, back to Kleine Dignidad.
Back again.
Back again.
Back again.
There is CIA documentation that they believe, they don't have evidence, like solid evidence themselves, but they assert that they knew that Otto Skorzeny and Josef Mengele had been in Colonia Dignidad several times.
Yeah.
But one of the things that Colonia Dignidad started to do was the producers of weapons, and a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
And this is where it starts to kind of piece together the evidence that they began to find in Colonia Dignidad after this stuff started to come to light, where they found rocket launchers, grenades, assembly lines to make bullets and weapons. And one of the funny things I found on like the kind of when they raided the place was that there were an unspecified amount of rocket launchers.
Yeah.
You think you could count those? They're pretty big.
Yeah.
So from here on out, this is where it starts to get nebulous, because during this point we're getting to about the 70s, and in Chile there was a democratically elected socialist president. I don't believe it was Allende. The president name was Allende.
Right.
And he initially got into power for the kind of do like just some very milquetoast social democratic reforms. Nothing too lefty.
Mm-hmm.
But slowly his policies started to get more left wing, and it was working in South America, and it started to show that this kind of system can work out, it being like a violent uprising or any of the stuff that we saw in Europe.
Yeah.
However, there were certain people that didn't like that.
Mm.
One of them being the U.S. government, the CIA, and a general that Allende had put in his cabinet, known as Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet is about as anti-communist as you can get before going like full Nazi.
Yeah.
Like, the guy despised communism, and by the end of his reign, Allende tragically said that the one thing that he was always worried about was the military. And he'd hoped that the military had been plated to their desires and he was able to carry on with his plans. Not long afterwards, a coup was instituted and Allende himself. Pinochet then came to power, and what happened at this point was there was the rounding up of left-wingers, and around 1,000 of them were sent to Colonia Dignidad.
Yeah.
Now, Colonia Dignidad wasn't just like a kind of colony for like weird Germans to LARP their like Volkish stuff. It was also obviously a weapons factory, but a prolific place of torture. And some of the things that we begin to see that came out of Colonia Dignidad when they investigated the accounts of people that were trapped there were that they were, they were electrocuted. They were, they were kind of told to stand in these weird positions. They had like these leather cloaks put over their faces with like some kind of chemical to make sure it was attached to their skin at all times.
Yeah.
They were drugged up to high heaven, and they were worked for like hours upon hours of time.
Yeah.
And the fact is that the CIA knew about this. They only just like there was an ABC article that popped up very recently where I think it was the beginning of last year where the CIA admitted they had some form of knowledge and involvement with Chile, Pinochet, and Colonia Dignidad.
Okay.
And these kind of techniques, the shockings of the electrocutions, a lot of it seems to only be traceable back to Colonia Dignidad, like the torture of like say the genitalia and being told to stand in weird positions have been like a staple of torture since time immemorial.
Yeah.
But it was the leather like and the electrodes to like the genitals that were something that was rather new. And when you begin to look a bit further into the future, you kind of see these parallels happening when the USA was in Iraq.
Yeah.
In places like Abu Ghraib, where if you want to look at pictures, and if chat wants to look at pictures of it, go ahead, but massive discretion advised.
Yeah.
I've seen them once, and I never want to see them again.
I saw it for while I was researching a school project, and I just no, I'm not looking at it again. Yeah, discretion is advised.
Yes, huge discretion is advised, but just picture a man stood on a box with like this leather hood around his head, this like kind of leather stuff draped over him, and he's stood in this very weird position, almost like kind of Jesus on the cross in a sense. He's able to hold his arms out, and he's got electrodes attached to his arms, but as well there is electrodes attached down there too.
Yeah.
And even as I've said that this thing is all very nebulous, the more you read about it, the more you sit there and just go, holy shit. Like there is just something to it.
Yeah.
And you can see it in other countries such as Argentina, where fascists overthrew Juan Perón.
Yeah.
Perón was kind of his ideology was weird. He seemed to do a lot of social reforms, a lot of kind of socialist stuff, but also seemed to have a immense fascination with Nazis, and a lot of Nazis escaped to Argentina, where Perón gave them asylum. Ecuador's another one. That place has been couped too many times to mention, and half of them have the CIA involvement.
It's fucked up there still.
Yes, yeah. Fascists were involved in the coups there too, and these were people who were straight from Germany, straight from Italy over to South America.
Yeah.
And there is more there. There is a lot more that we can talk about. There's but I don't know too much about this. Things like Le Cercle, P2, P7, how Le Cercle was had a major role in getting Margaret Thatcher to power.
Yeah.
They were caught in Belgium in massive arms trafficking and sex trafficking scandals, all linked, and all these different organizations were rostered by previous former fascists of the Germans and the Italians, and it just goes on and on and on. And I've been talking for about 30 minutes.
Yep.
And
that's fine.
Yeah, that's the theory.
Yeah. Like, Kami,
you begin to talk about it.
Yeah, it's like where within the entire spectrum? Because the thing about this theory though is it brings in a lot of smaller theories in terms of where did they go, who went where, who survived, who this and that, right?
Mm.
And like, I mean, I've delved into this before, especially with Colonna Dignidad. Like, I'm somewhat versed in it. So, Kami, what do you think? Like, where do you kind of have you been able to pay
love
attention
my
to it?
history.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love my history. So learning all this is like, oh, the more you know.
Yeah.
No, but with where you guys are talking about, I never knew this shit, and I'm very big in history, especially when it comes to World War II and what happened after that and so forth.
Yeah.
And it's like I didn't know that this many people would get out the way they did, and were doing what they were doing still without people really noticing.
Yeah.
You know. So for me, it's more of like an awe. Is like, damn, you never know what can be going on in the world if you're not really paying attention or you're not really looking, because those people are still out there. You know.
And like, it's just like how it's all just seems to just like kind of when it all ended, it just seemed to slowly dissipate out. But like, really see a lot of history about it. You have to look like. You have to be.
Yeah.
It's not something you could just find in one book.
No.
Yeah.
It's different monads, essentially. There's different things that seemingly together to kind of give this hypothesis.
Yeah.
Continue into a gibbering madman.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
But it's stuff like, if we were to go more into like, I don't know, if we look to like say something like Italy and Operation Gladio, that's quite an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because it's just this like, you've heard about Operation Gladio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this just, it's part of one part of like, it's one of the more convincing ones within it. It's stuff like Colonial Dignidad and Operation Gladio, which is just insanely interesting, that there was essentially these like sleeper cells that were just ready to be activated in Europe.
Yeah.
If things were to go the way that the US didn't want them to go.
Yeah.
But there's even like another bit I realise I've left out, that like, it wasn't just in Europe, it wasn't just in Latin America. I said it spanned at least 3 continents. Well, actually it spans 4. Because we look at some
Asia?
like Jakarta. Yeah, Indonesia.
Yeah.
Indonesia was a country at the time that was still very much influenced by the British, but had its independence, but they were still part of the Commonwealth, I believe.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
And what was happening in Indonesia was that there was many different parties that were vying for power, but one that was gaining a lot of power was the communists. They'd effectively gone out into the kind of the villages and were effectively organising the peasants out in, farmers out there, to not to arm themselves. They were like completely peaceful, but they were winning election after. They were like slowly rising up the ranks of like the popular parties, and I think they were poised to win the next election there.
Yeah.
And this was in the 60s. But at one point, there was what we call a Tonkin incident, where there was an accusation that a bunch of a kind of group of feminists, like Maoists, had done a ritual sacrifice on a bunch of generals and chucked them in a well. And that was basically that was like what they needed to enact brutal repression of like not just communists but just left wingers in general. And it wasn't just obviously the Indonesians themselves, like the Indonesian government, that had like a hand in this. It was the British sent out detachments of like battalions of soldiers to go to Indonesia and assist with this. And the kind of the military dictatorship wasn't explicitly fascist, but like other stuff, was. It just reading about, you like, oh, this makes me feel icky. But I'm trying to make this sound light because it just gets worse.
Yeah.
In Indonesia, roughly, the estimates are that 600,000 people died.
Yeah.
In less than 5 years.
Yeah.
And we basically go full circle around the world.
Yeah.
That we go to back to South America, where Pinochet was inspired by this, and what was dubbed essentially the Jakarta method.
Yeah.
And Pinochet, with the help of other fascist groups and these people who had come over from the Nazi Germany, were basically spray painting around cities where they thought there were suspected communists, just literally the word
Yeah.
to basically scare people, because everyone had been hearing about it. And it's then that you realise that this kind of thing, as separate of all these things can be read in history, it spans the globe, and it's kind of what's kept this kind of stint of not just anti-communism, but like opposition to even the most milquetoast left that can be constituted, and it is, as I've said, in a malicious way, that it never ended. The Third Reich never ended. It was just stripped for parts and reconstituted into the world that we live in now.
Yeah. It's like I do think when one thing is when people talk about well, for one is that I think people just don't realize that people talk about how many people died because of World War II. Yeah, a lot of people died during the war, but there were so many people that died because of the aftermath of the war. With, for example, what you talked about, Indonesia and stuff like that. And people when people think about, how do people think that the concept of neo-Nazi actually, how do people think that came about? It wasn't just some guy who was sitting in history class and decided, you know what, the Nazis were right. No, it stems from something.
Hitler made some good points, didn't he?
Hey, you know what? They had a point, those fuckers. Yeah.
Don't clip this out of context.
No. Oh my god.
Everyone in the class just looks at them.
Imagine. No. So that's no. Because I think the biggest part with any conspiracy theory regarding whether it be that Hitler is alive or whether it be this, there's one thing that it always goes back to, and that is South America, specifically Dignidad.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
The most concrete thing in any theory regarding the Nazis after World War II, Colonial Dignidad is, I think, the most concrete thing that you cannot deny.
Yeah.
That is where that is where whoever you think survived or whatever, that's where they went.
They're there.
That's where they fucking went, and that's where they established. And you also see it in I don't think there's a huge neo-Nazi movement over in South America, but you notice in a lot of the politics that are still going on in South America and some of the political views that it's not a surprise that that's where they ended up settling down.
Yeah.
And there was also, I don't think that people realize that there was actually a plan, not necessarily by Hitler to go there when they lost, but there was actually a plan with Nazis and South America that basically had a spot there. And I've seen photos of Colonia Dignidad. The place looks very beautiful.
Yeah.
You realize the people that went here, we're talking the top, not just the top, the highest ranking went here, but also a lot of them were a lot more fucked up than what Hitler was. You can you can talk about how far Mignolet himself, he was a lot more fucked up than what Hitler was. The amount of kids that he killed doing this. Even though Hitler wanted more of the Aryan race, he didn't tell Joseph Mignolet yeah, can you just try and take ink into their eyes, see if that works?
Yeah, and as you kind of look at it with how a lot of history is taught, that it's just kind of go, oh, and poof, they disappear. But how do you have this structure, a form of government that's essentially the marrying of the state, the spirit, and corporations? How on earth does that just disappear? It doesn't. It's reconstituted. It's remolded, And like one of the very weird statistics I remember seeing at one point was that in West Germany, at any given time during the Cold War, 50% of the entire ministry was populated by ex-Nazis.
Yeah.
So it's like you can start to just draw these lines. They're not always straight.
Yeah.
Not always straight lines. They're a bit wonky sometimes, but you can just start to draw these lines that they go from, you know, Germany to Spain to Italy to South America, and then, you know, back again to like Europe, but then these spread out to like places like Indonesia, and it's a system that I don't think we've ever truly, like, we'll never truly gain the perspective
No,
how big this structure is.
We'll never fully grasp what the Nazis actually did after World War II, because I think I think now obviously we know, like, it's a known thing that they had some sort of plan with South America. What it was, people are not sure of, but they know there was some plan there. So I think it's almost like irrefutable to say that they had plans in place. That's how so many of them got away, is they had plans in place. I think they had so many fail-safes set in place, with or without Hitler. I mean, you can, if we want to delve into the theory of him being dead or not, like that's another thing. But like,
he ain't dead.
I wouldn't be surprised if most of his officers, the ones that did survive, whether Hitler knew about this or not, like that they actually had like fail switches in place in case everything went to shit, or just in general to like, okay, well, after the war, this is what we're gonna do. Retire. We're gonna go to South America. We got our own community there that we're gonna set up and do whatever the fuck we want. And like, I don't think people realize as well, like, this was, you can say whatever you want about the Nazis. They had some of the best scientists and everything like that. That's why there was so many. That's why Colonial Dignidad is such a high factor point, is because of the fact of who went there, how powerful people that went there. Like Angel of Death, obviously him going there, that's one thing. Joseph Mengele, like, with what, like, these are like some of the most, like, the best scientists and whatever the fuck it is you can think about.
And military minds as well.
Yeah, military minds. All of this collected in one place. Of course, this community is gonna flourish.
Yeah, and what was it? I totally lost my train of thought. But it's not even that. It's like that. It's not because these people were smart, but it's also that war, right, is one of the greatest advances of technology going.
Yeah.
And so when you obviously take these kind of like this kind of state away from them, and they obviously kind of spread out and become this kind of this structure that, and they're wanting to see like a rise of it again.
Yeah.
They're obviously still in their minds. They're still at war.
Yeah.
So they're obviously going to be continually finding ways and methods of creating new forms of, warfare, torture, and methods of making money. Yeah. Through some things, arms trafficking, smuggling of drugs.
Yeah.
All sorts. That's how like they can continue to fund themselves through like these really kind of fucked up like systems. But at the same time, it's not just obviously Germany itself, but there was many businesses that were outside of Germany that were explicitly trading with the Nazis during wartime. I mean, God, IBM's involvement in the Nazi kind of extermination plans was supercharged by their tabulator machines. Yeah. And you can even look at how Hitler took influence from the USA. Yeah. That Hitler noted is like in his diaries that like he was amazed and shocked by how the US had that one drop rule. Yeah. Where, one drop of non-white blood and you're not considered white. And Hitler was just like, wow, that's even more harsh than what I've got. Yeah. Because he had that very, I don't know too much about it, they had the very tiered system of people at the top, the Übermenschen, and then like people that were like, yeah, you're still kind of up there, but you're not really true. And then like,
Yeah.
yeah, there was only right to the bottom rungs where they were like, yeah, we're getting rid of you, and
Yeah.
it just the mind begins my mind begins to unravel and become mushy and cheesy and
Yeah.
where it's like this state that was the state of the German state at that time wasn't just this kind of like it didn't just appear just from like the will of the German people, but it was influenced but from the outside and then supported after it collapsed,
Yeah.
not by nation states but by like I said, like detachments of like governments that kind of operate on their own fruition, such as the CIA.
Yeah.
And yeah, God, I think I have to get a corkboard and some yarn.
No, but like it's also like as we said, like when you have this amount of big brain people, you have to realize that they don't just go down and they're just defeated. They have some sort of plan just in case. And the smartest thing they did was retreating to something like Dignidad right after the war and settling down for a bit. Because
Yeah.
like partly because of the fact that after the war, what are the Europeans, the Americans, what's everyone going to start trying to do? Rebuild, try and get back to a normal society.
Yeah.
Yes,
the Marshall Plan.
Yeah, like yes, they still had people chasing Nazis to try and dig them out, but they went to a place where they were not going to be found. And then it's perfect for them to also have time to build up this community that they were going to set up. And then keep on with even more plans. Which,
I mean,
chances are, like in terms of...
I mean, how Paul was only arrested in 2000.
Yeah.
There were hundreds of visits to Colonia Dignidad. Or like, I think it was about 100 visits. There was one specific investigator that said that every time he went to Colonia Dignidad to investigate, he said that he could feel the presence of Paul Schaefer.
Yeah.
And he knew that he had just missed Schaefer. And, well, Schaefer was, in fact, for a long time, whenever they came to investigate, was underground.
Yeah.
He was in the bunkers. And you can Google pictures of these, like, tunnels.
Yeah.
That were throughout Colonia Dignidad. There was literally like a network of these tunnels, and you can't help but think that Paul Schaefer being down those tunnels that he wasn't thinking about his idol.
Yeah.
In a similar vein. And God, you look at the footage of Paul Schaefer getting arrested, and there's just in 2005, and there's just nothing.
Yeah.
You just look at his face, and you're just like, oh God! Like, and the place, Colonia Dignidad, is now a holiday camp.
Yeah, it's literally you can set up a vacation plan and go there, dude. Like it's absolutely, but I mean it is too beautiful to go to waste. I'm not gonna lie, but then again, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if some motherfucker decides. If some crazy motherfucker decides that he's just gonna dig into the ground and finds the Nazi treasure.
How's the water? How's the water?
Imagine like the Nazi treasure. Imagine if that's there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
No, I have myself eating.
Yeah.
Oh.
My bad. No, go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and I never truly found the gold.
No, they
silver,
they haven't found anything yet, and so I feel like the thing is, I think that the reason why no one's looking at Colonia Dignidad is I think because it is a vacation plan, but I think that if you're gonna find it, you're gonna find it there, or it doesn't exist and they just invested that into all their fucking rockets and shit. I wouldn't be surprised, considering the smarts that were collected in one place. If they butt their heads together and just go, oh, dude, if all of those guys were still alive now,
Maybe
and working, oh my god,
God, they're all like they'll be well over 100.
They probably
Yeah.
they probably cloned like Hitler just like Palpatine did, you know?
Yeah,
With all
dude.
the technology they had, they probably did figure that out.
Yeah.
He's alive.
You brought it back to the original point of this, like the start of this podcast. You've given a Star Wars reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to.
Like,
What I'm thinking, he's not dead. He just cloned himself. He's fine.
yeah.
He'll be back in 5 years.
Oh my God.
would-
Hitler,
would think-
Hitler reborn. That's like his campaign slogan.
Yeah, he's hiding Korea right now.
Yeah. Actually,
he's just taking a holiday again.
he's going to art. He's going to art school. May-
I will succeed this time.
yeah. This time the outcome is gonna be different.
This time I will make absurdist art.
And if not, he'll be like, oh, I'll try
Oh
again in
no, but like that's the issue with art these days is like he could fucking put paint on his hand, put that on a canvas, and that's art, and it's gonna go for $1 million. Like the thing about like the reason why we got a full episode of this isn't just because there's so much to delve into, but there's so in terms of any theories regarding the Nazis, it's such an open book, and there's no period at the end of this story. It's just a comma, you know?
Yeah.
Like I don't think we're ever going to find out everything. Never.
No, never.
I actually think it's gonna end up being like the ocean,
I wish.
where we're not even gonna be close to, we're not even gonna be halfway there. We're not gonna, in 50 years, we're not even gonna know 50% of what the Nazis did after World War II, because I think it's such a complex thing, and with so many different operations and stuff, and we have no clue what they all did.
It was like Jewish people that did survive. They wrote on their side, but we never got the side of the Germans. You know what I mean? Like any doctors that have written about it, what they really did and stuff. You know.
Yeah.
And I wish that we would get more of that understanding, because I'm a little curious. That may sound bad, but I'm like kind of nosy on that part. I'm like, I want to know exactly what the hell they did.
Yeah.
What else did they do? Like, you know, like I want to know that side of the story, on that side of history. You want to know. You're a little eager to kind of understand.
Yeah.
And know what else done, or what other plans that they had in case something went bad, what they do, or the other project that they had ideas of doing, but they haven't started that idea yet. You know what I mean? Imagine what worse things they probably thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this, to use like another like kind of analogy or like a relation to things, that one of the major things that like the kind of the Volkish movement kind of had the idea of was the theory of the hollow earth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And part of it, to use the analogy, as we try and dig deeper, we're essentially digging deeper into this like subterranean hollow earth, and we're going to keep digging and digging and digging, and we're going to keep finding more and more layers and realms of stuff, of weird like discrepancies in history, and you just keep going. But if like it is to be believed that that it never ended, they're just going to continually descend into this kind of deeper and blacker space.
And like
to follow them down is to drive oneself mad.
Yeah. I would, for example, is this still, are they just building up a massive operation? For all we know, they can have sleeper agents everywhere. You know? It actually wouldn't surprise me, considering the scientific genius that was collected, the tactical mindset that was collected. I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to make like a contingency plan for however many years for how they're gonna do this. But the thing that I want to, like, in terms of with this, like with any conspiracy theory that like revolves around the Nazis after World War II, the one answer I really fucking want: what was the true plan of Colonna Dignidad? What was the specific intention with going there? And also, like, and then within part of that, was that planned? Cause we know that they had plans of going to South America at some point, but what
was it somewhere
but
else?
was the plan we're going to go to Colonia Dignidad and create this own part of it, or and was that then a plan if they lost? Was it a plan in general? Was it what was the entire idea around Colonia Dignidad? Was that even the
Yeah.
destination?
And once they were there, once they were all set up and constituted there, it's like, well, what was the next plan?
Yeah.
What was the next step in,
Yeah.
what the creation of like a new kind of international Fourth Reich? Like, how are they going to
Yeah.
get there? Are they going to
Yeah.
And yeah, it just gets more insane and I know I don't want to add more onto this because then we're just going to get into another absolutely insane James Mason.
Oh yeah, we'll take that another time.
Yeah, but even then, it's like the same kind of like stuff that he was writing about, where it's
Yeah.
like we will separate off into our separate little spots, and then one day when it all goes to shit, we will then enact our plan
Yeah.
and create this bring on a new dawn.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Oh god, I can feel myself going crazy.
Yeah. Now it's such a deep rabbit hole that has so many nooks and crannies and detours, and there's just way too much to, I guess, go into. But I guess I'm pretty sure we all agreed that most of this, if not all of it, definitely did happen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
But
yeah.
oh god, I'll say that like, if there's one thing that kind of brings a bit of like hope to me whenever I think about this stuff, there was like one of the podcasts I listened to find out about this was obviously Truanon's little series on it, and they talk about a book called Gravity's Rainbow,
Yeah.
which is basically the analogy for the kind of the flight path of a V2 rocket.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the author, but he basically talks about in one of the passages that they obviously went underground to try and find, to create this like going down into the blacker and blacker elements of like the subterranean, but they'll never find like a bringing from death to life again. All it will constitute is going from death to a further version and a darker version of death. There isn't this kind of like, there isn't a hope in a sense for them to kind of revitalize themselves to what they once were. It only leads to more destruction.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope that it's when I read these theories, because it's like, it failed once. It's not going to rise again in the same way, but will it ever fully reconstitute itself as in even the shadow of its former glory?
Yeah.
And then my answer to that is no.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And I'm like, I can go to bed now. I can sleep, Sally.
It's like it's gonna be like the first order to the Empire. You know what I mean? Like it's probably gonna be a shittier version, and considering the times we're in as well, I don't think that if their plan was to, if they have sleeper agents around, right, and they've actually made up some sort of plan for the future, I don't think they're gonna get to the point where they're actually gonna dare to initiate this. Considering how the world is going now, with Russia being how it is, with the US being how it is, with the amount of atomic power that is just everywhere in the world, with all of the nuclear warheads that are out, I don't think they would dare. I'm not sure if they're actually going to dare to. I don't think they're gonna have the resources for this. I know they definitely have enough. They have a lot of resources to do a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure if they have what is needed to actually make some sort of war, unless they have some sort of control in South America. That their plan, the reason they went to South America is because they actually had a plan to instigate themselves within the politics there. That wouldn't surprise me. With countries like Ecuador, how that is going, with Argentina and Chile, which are the two most prevalent countries that they were in, right? I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, and that they have some sort of massive plan for that. But I don't think they do. I don't think they would have been able to get all of these governments on their side after just losing the war as badly as they did.
Yeah.
And I don't think, because considering the span that they would have to, the span of the time they would have to request this camaraderie, it was too near the war and before anyone else had warheads. So it would just been okay, the US just dropped nukes. No, we're not joining you guys, so you guys can fuck off, right? I wouldn't be surprised. So the Nazis, and then by the time that quote unquote settled down, it would have been too late to request it, because why the fuck would they give a fuck about allying with the Nazis that have been hiding, you know? So the only possibility for them nowadays, if they were going to try and instigate something, would be if they had gotten some of the South American countries on their side. But the chances of that are very, very slim. Without that, okay, they might have some sleeper agents that can take out some powerful people. Okay, that's it. They won't have anything else. If they have one sleeper agent in the White House to take out the president, okay, well, he's got a wise president. He's got someone else that can step in for him. I don't think that, even let's say they have 1,000 sleeper agents around the world right now. That's a lot.
Deep for this.
Yeah, that's a lot, but it's not enough. Because they will need a full fucking army to do anything now. And considering the conflict going on now with Russia and Ukraine and stuff like that, this isn't the time. And by the time they get to the time, quote unquote, get to the time to attack or whatever the fuck, it's gonna be too late. They're not gonna have any sort of grasp on it, if that. So I think that whatever thing, I think what they planned made sense then, but they just couldn't foresee how the table turned, basically, and how the world has come about now for the last 70 years since then.
Yeah, it's dissipated so much that obviously we can see the kind of the connections that are there, but at the same time it's dissipated so much that we'll only see the kind of these separate groups in disparate places may enact something, but don't think it would ever truly be enough to enact a full-blown change and complete reversal of the way the world's gone. But yeah, that's what gives me a bit of hope.
Yeah.
When I read these theories, I'm like, okay, this is fine. This is fine.
We're gonna be okay. You're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really have much more to say, to be honest. I think we've gone. I think we've gone. For me, as far as I could really.
Yeah.
It.
Yeah. I think
going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just me in the back. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I think in terms of tracking to the fact of the conspiracy theory of it, I think we all agree that probably happened. They probably had some sort of plan for this, but I think we can all agree that if it isn't diminished fully yet, it is slowly diminishing, because they're doing that they could never have planned for what has happened.
But I will say, just to give you a bit of, for anybody who wants to read more about this, there's certain books you can read if you want to read about kind of the kind of weird occult stuff surrounding it. There's a really good book by Nicholas Goodrick Clark called The Occult Roots of Nazism. there's another book that I've quoted, which is The Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins, and also a book that I've yet to read but tends to kind of discuss this stuff. It's also Black Shirts and Reds by Michael Parenti.
Yeah.
So these are kind of like the ways that if you want to just gain like an overall picture of what the world has been like post World War II in terms of these kind of these events that we've spoke about, then you can give those a read. But I would say for the Jakarta Method, again, for your discretion advised. Have an animal or someone you love to hold while you're reading that book.
Oh.
Yeah,
Have your cat with you.
Get ready to take a long walk with like your favorite music on, because these as infinitely interesting as this topic is, it's also something that you can only learn so much about before you don't need to know anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many details to all this shit that is so fucked up that you can really delve into if you want to. But as Jacob said, like, have something nearby or prep a playlist that you know is gonna cheer you up, because you might end up needing it.
Knowledge sometimes isn't power. Knowledge can sometimes be maddening. There's a funny little image that I sometimes like to see of a book, and it's like, what is it? It'd be so great being stupid.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen that picture.
No, knowledge is a curse. Yeah, I've seen it. But yeah, I have a pretty good place to that one. Any of you guys got any final words before we start tuning out?
Hitler's not dead. Hitler.
This is true. Hitler's not dead.
Well, for me, it's just, well, even with this knowledge, if you've learned something from here and you find it all like maddening or whatever, just have a nice week. Just do what you love, and you just do what you love. There's nothing that we can do to change this. There's nothing we can do to look back at the past and think what could have been different. What's different? But just enjoy your week and do what you love. All right.
Exactly. That's a wholesome message that we've had at the podcast, and I really do appreciate it, Jacob.
Thank you,
Jacob. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode. I have a feeling, and I really hope that it is, the second of many.
I'm more than happy to come back on it. Just maybe the conspiracy theory one can stay on the shelf, or if we do this again, that we just do some really wacky off the wall stuff.
Yeah. We should do more alien ones.
Let the viewers decide.
Yeah.
See what the viewers have to say.
Alien ones. Yes.
Alien ones would be good. Do a conspiracy theories about aliens. That would be good.
Yeah. There's so much there.
There's so much, and the one that we had.
Info released was that'd be pretty good to get into.
Yeah. We should all just raid Area 51 and then do a podcast about it. Yeah. The one from yesterday is still sitting pretty prevalent in my soul, about the aliens. So if anyone was listening, if you didn't listen to the previous episode 20, where it was just me and Jacob, I suggest you go and have a listen and listen through the entire thing, and I guarantee you that the final theory, you will not be disappointed. There's a lot of good shit in there, but the final one is definitely one that's gonna twist your gears a little bit. So
is the podcast already up, that episode?
It is not up yet, but I'm going to upload it as soon as we are done with this. Actually, I'm going to start the uploading process of that one, and then I'm going to get this one up probably tomorrow. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the High Council podcast. Kami, thank you for making your return, you sweet bastard. And
yes, sir.
Jacob, as a special guest, you're more than welcome back anytime, pal. Even if it is something other than conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yes. Politics.
No, shush. If it's politics of Star Wars, cool. I'll do that.
Oh yeah, let's just do a full episode about politics and Star Wars and moral and right decisions here. That would be great. Go through like everything from the Old Republic up until, I guess, quote unquote present time. And then be like, yep, okay, so these were the worst bastards. Also, the Empire and the First Order were both based on Nazis, so that's great. All right. Kami, I know that you usually did do it, but I did it yesterday, and I think I have a pretty good one for today. So, guys, if you don't like, follow, subscribe, whatever it may be on the platform, right? I'm gonna send Joseph Mengele after you. Um, in terms of threats, I think that's in terms of threats. I think what we've.
Yeah.
Hey, at least I said I'll send it after them and not like. You know what? It would have been.
Wits or sending Hitler. Oh, you
No, yeah, I went for the worst motherfucker. Well, at least, you know what would have been worse though if I was like, yeah, I'll send him after your family or whatever the fuck, or you kids. I don't know. That would have been worse.
Don't even. Not all outside thoughts need to. Not all inside thoughts need to be outside thoughts. Fella.
No, right now they did. But anyways, thank you all so much for listening to this Council podcast. It was a great one and a fucked up one, but that's because when it comes to conspiracy theories, especially about the Nazis, it is usually pretty fucked up. So
yeah.